Namo Buddha. Namo Dharamaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurube. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharamaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurube. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharamaya. Namo Ayo. Kandela ye gwenye doka. Raga sho. Sonjinje. Che ye ye bo. Gwenye lo sanja. Se ga je bo. Ne de she so. De ye na ga sen je me. Che zhe ma ma ye ve zong ka. A lo de me se na xian zhong. Ten ba ye jie ge ya shu zo. Xie jie zhe ge cha ve lo zhen. Ge zan na ve yan yu le xie. Cha be be ye la me ze. To de de be de de la cha. Ye wo zhe ye na zo me do. Tie jin do be na ze je cha. Wo sha ye zhe xue zhe ya zo. So na xian zhong. Jie la che ba. A jie do me de ne za ba. Liu ma ye jie me ge jie jie. Ye ba ra dong ba son ye me de. Ye ne ye ba cha bu so zo sha. Ye me de de ma de lo la je. Che ye ba be na yo de ye. Bon bo ye ye la je ze ba. A ja san ba da be ye ra. Xie zi ma ma da ba ye. Che gu ga la. Tian zhe jian zhe ne. Che da san bian de jie 三界觉也差我多，那么大为子也来显我，所住过来常对面我。太没那我做过这东，现在蛮多没路天不就，太做些年三别给我。天南着我归来看遍的，天不来接着来三寨八一，天边年不人多。没没在为得了见见人在，天没见别万不长别，天不马了中在上边。看见也别做也做，来三场别下来做我，没在别在这见。万不将别将，天不满了中的三别，看见也别做也做。 Let us take a moment and cultivate bodhicitta motivation, the highest form of motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. At least with that kind of a contrived motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim discourse, discourse on the stages of the path leading to enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa. Allow me to read about a couple of pages from the Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stage of path enlightenment, volume number 3, in the English translation, page 314, to give you the blessing of lineage oral transmission, followed by explication.
Tōdēne sōngbī shērō tēwā gōbī drība lā tāgā lā tēne jēwā gī shidā jīgā sūyā tēmbā yī tāmbā dīgā lā shēntā tē tarā gōbā mē nō tē rāngshī yī chāw gā bā lō tēne ngōbā rāngshī mē bā ngī bā nī tā ngōbā mē bā lā yā rāngshī mē bā rā ngī bā nī bā lā yī shūyā tāng shī rāngshī tāng bā rā tā bā ōm yē tā wā dēlā tū nī tō shēn yā rāb shī tūng bā lē tēn shīn tē shūng khīng bā tēne ngō nī jī shī shē tāng shū bā lē kāshī ngō bā tēne rā tō tā tā mē nē bā tē tēng rō tēne tēng tā wā tā tā chū bā rā shē shē sō bā tā tēn shīn tē shē tā lā tēn yō gu lā sā rā yīn tō bā lā ngē bā nī nē nē khō sā yī nā nē khosa jeba lola shendu namba sewe chungse jeba shao de nyugune range ngo chebe rangshime de range ge jen la de shwe pe na sone she shenra jeba shao pe na shi hin je so ne na na shebo shung nam Mina so so no de de lo di ye ngo na de de yin ji she de na de ji tong rang ge ne ju min mo ni min ji ba tong de rang ne lo sa de lo so je bo xin de sim jen dang ja nyu da na ye che na la de de na lo ang ge sha bo me ba tong de ji na de rang wo guan yu de de lo ju yo ba je be rang yi yo ba do tao zhe yin la ti yu ye rang xin ten zhao ne rang wo de rang xin ten rang ye tong yin pe te zhao wa yu na ne ju jin le ra ma ju jin la ra le bang ge de be me de ming ge na ne chu sim be bom ba la ra ya je le je me go bo ke lang xin du me go bo ke lang du me ro yin te de na xia ba Kal tene jong ye wa tene rang gu tene ne rang me jo ro tene ne tu gu rang me wa tena da ne ye ma she song shi tin zhe wa le ye tene rang ngo da rang xin da rang wa xin la rang ma lo ni ba te la ne rang le yu chu be tin zhe wa jo Yo mai na du je dang je den zhe ba zhong wa yin wo de gong te de ngo bo la kan la den wo ye ba den rang de men ju yu yin la ra le be che de de go rang me wa ti ji ngo bo kan la yang da de rang yin yo ba mai no xie song so da tyun zu de de kar sa do ba ji bu pung bi se do ba ji bu pung bi se de ki ji do sa da kan ji 大洋的国家呢，草莽退了，草莽没有吃我做什么的，就是退没有吃我做什么，今天呢，可是啊，今天是吃我做为呢，做多嘛的，你吃我吃多的是，个呀就这多把就不必说，那个你那干啥来着？多把就不必说，前面做要么是，他们家怎么做就，要么人提干干个是的，可是呢呀，他们家怎么呢？这个干啥了？我提的，你就提这下。
Geshe read from page 314, volume number 3 in English translation, to page 317, almost to the bottom, to give us the blessing of lineage oral transmission. The point Geshe made is this: there are a lot of arguments that we witness here is related back to what we talked about some time ago. With regard to a logical profession that was not established. This was some time ago, and where I think the opponents were saying that there is no such thing as valid cognitions of pramana, so referring back to that, we talked quite some time ago, and how the logical profession was not established or could not be established.
No, nobody will be Chavatella, Joe, no Lubon Shivamende. T. Nusi Jan, someone then to Chavzona, may Chavadroman, 문도 가베가 셰신도 되게 셰다 세메조세네 나고이 세메조 시고기 추주로 하고 말이스 근데 나고 그 다음에 저번에 수 다음에 세메마도 또 요사나 누르시 그랬지 제가 계란장 주고 뭐 이제 세메조는 거야 요 말이스 어디 기지다이니 가자데 리히니 문은 예바요 어디 가사인자 다 도버지 풍부세야지 되게 강제 리베 마비세베나 다 까우니 셴 바당시现在这个问题吧，这个那一旦有啊，这个嘛是，上面你现在话说，这是这个吧，这呢，你是把配的嘛都是，日本人的嘛这样写，多不就是呢，人家没有写的话，首先这个把的卡包呢，把文个配我这是我的，要地的，可是开始干啥的，现在现行都送的。
Kaboni na shinrwage,
라.
shayna chiki maris, kentan dokochibo harsonbege.
도버지 벌써 뜻을
dokochibo 타고.
도버지 벌써 최저적으로서 맨날 까불으시 까와 나 범반인데 현인데这个말봐
올라로와.
어때면 저는 사용이 현을 봐 현도 사고는 여기这个 말스 도저히 도와지고 풍부스워 현 까분이다 선인이라고 말봐 까분이 좋아요 말아 선인이 좋아요 봐 어디 좋아하게 되게 되면 최저적 최저 어떻게 가갈 봐 키는 부자자 소리들 도와지고 풍부스워
No. So one of the key points that we witnessed some time ago is where it was stated that by the opponents there is no such thing as valid cognitions of pramana or sema in Tibetan, and so the whole argument was built on the case that when there are two debaters, right, the respondent and the questioner, it is possible that one of them may have, realized or taken for granted whatever it is, if the case may be. But if there is no logical validity way to reason out, to establish the thesis, then there's no way to prove the point, because it's something you probably knew it or take for granted, but without the use of logical reasoning and validity, there's no established that it is the case for the other person, so the whole that argument was built on the case that there is no such thing as valid cognition or pramana. And also, related to that, what the opponent seems to be saying is that just like a pot or a vase, pumba, and a pillar, a kawa, they cannot produce each other, right? They are different phenomena. They cannot produce each other. In the same way, a seed and the seedling are two different phenomena, and they could not produce each. There could not be cause and effect relationship here. And of course, the response to that is, your example and is not working because a pillar and a vase have no relationship whatsoever, right? Without any kind of correlationship, we cannot establish a cause and effect relationship. Whereas a seed and its seedling or sprout, yes, they are different. Right? Seed is not sprout, sprout is not seed, but they have the correlationship. And so based upon that, we can establish that a seed sprouts or seed can produce sprinklings. So you cannot say that because things are of the same nature, they cannot produce each other. So that's the refutation here.
어디 기지 공도 해자 해야 돼. 간지 다 켈라장지 가나에는 이거 말했어. 나고 치고디 키 근데 켈랑고 유미 켈랑버레 사나 코 켈랑 유미 하고 말았어. 나고 치고 그 가르시 하고 뭐 세면도 뭐 대야 직바라 왔어. 근데 이 소소 그 치고디 봐 뇌지를 땅면이나 소소 뇌지 인상나 이 돈다 뇌지 만족이 되신 연구를 뇌가 시기로 왔어. 제가 저런 게 세면 좀 받이 거야요 말이 캐나다니까 아니세나 리그문도 어디 집어지경래도 뭐지 이 뒤가도 말했을 때 그진 걸 해자라 어디
So this argument was kind of laid out quite some time ago, where you cannot simply use what somebody contended as a reasoning to establish that that's what you are accepting. because thesis must be established on the basis of authentic reasoning or valid reasoning. And as part of that argument, what was said is that there is no valid cognition. So if there is no such valid cognition, then how do we know that something exists validly or could be established through valid and cognitions? Because both respondents and the questioners, they don't read each other's mind, and so how do we know? I mean, who has realized what? That is just a contention, because you cannot use reasoning to establish that, because you said there is no valid cognition, there's no valid way of knowing, right, and establishing whatever the contention or the thesis is. So all that arguments was, I think, what we had dealt with quite some time ago.
어디 러시 니시발라 교대 김 교대 제비 셰나 교대 김에 수바 셰 저발레 셰나 되는 해 정어주는 오늘 매절에 보데 예지 타제 제저 예바셔 뭐라 신이 손 세야디 셰도 러시 집에 타디나 가르사디 레메톤에 타디 레메톤에 타디에는 집에 깨쇼여나 에네 매절 몽바투바 깨와다 에네 몽발레 나와께야 소저 에네 다다 사시 코라시나 요도 주모이 봐 에네 데그 사원레 네게야서도 어디데 강가 지르고 셔도 그래서 어디래.
So on the top of page 314, those who are using electronic version of Lamrim Chemo, it is under the subpoint refutation or production from other or another. So on top of page 314, who had the text in your hand, what you find stated there, we have a citation from R.A. Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise, and followed by Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way. According to Geshe's explanation, if one were to contend that things exist intrinsically or things are intrinsically existent, then if things are intrinsically existent and intrinsically different, those things cannot have any kind of correlationship or correlations among themselves. So in which case, the cause and effect, the theory of cause and effect is completely undermined and destroyed, because things that exist intrinsically, things that are intrinsically different, they cannot cause each other. If you still insist they could produce each other, then it's as crazy as saying that anything can happen, right? Darkness can produce light, and light can produce darkness, and barley can produce rice, and seeds can produce barley, and anything can happen berserk way, because now there is no rhyme or rhythm or cause and effect principles exist, because whatever, as my students love to say. So it's whatever is happening,
진짜에 텐규들라 유지도 도미도라 소베레 메데데 라지타데비 셰네 유지도 바니 먼저바 나마데셔로 어디 자셔도 다들 저거마스 네기 사원 네기 제 사원 저기 가서 제 사원 제 네기 뭐 다시 깨고 말이 거기 유지가 요리세네 인정시 집에 타디니 유지지야요 말스 데미도 이래서라 데미도 유지지야요 말바 어디서 또 라비나 인 렌테 말라고 다가지.
So we are in the middle of page 314. That's last paragraph right after Chandrakirti's citation from the Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way. So what is stated there is this: that conventionally speaking, rice seeds produce rice seedlings, and the barley seeds will produce barley sprouts, but they don't exist intrinsically, and that's why that kind of a cause and effect relationship is tenable and it is possible. But if you insist that things exist intrinsically and things are intrinsically different, then such intrinsically existent different things could not produce each other, because there's no need in the first place, and plus there cannot be any kind of relationships that is tenable between them. And if you still, so in other words, that in the framework of intrinsic reality or Rangshinji Duba, we cannot posit or assert cause and effect relationship which assumes correlational relationships and dependent relationships. And so therefore you cannot say that barley seeds and the rice seeds, they belong to the same kind of continuity or continuum, because they cannot be, because barley seed is intrinsically different from rice seed and vice versa, and they could not belong to the same continuum of phenomena, if you will.
어디 다 제가 제와데 메겨 녀와 통야 렌드무스 데서 데게 비 네게 사본네 네 제게 드레 사본네 드케게 봐 티가서 고소 통하러 왔어 라비나 어디야 렌레가 말세요 제와데 메겨 녀와 통 렌드 메론데 타예데 티디고데 엔 통담바시네 엔 카르사 사유타데스 시다 텔이야 엔 유직세야도 엔 예바 통화해야 돼. 렌저도 뭐 예바 통화해야 돼. 딱동으로 되는 데 딱동 이해하면서 근데 가마도 돼. 렌 보고 말이 시고 다 건지.
So basically, opponent is being informed that they cannot use the direct valid perception as a reasoning to establish their case, because what they're contending is things exist intrinsically. And things are intrinsically different, yet intrinsically different things produce intrinsically different things, right? Now that's untenable in our position or in the Pasangika's position. Geshe didn't say that. I hope I'm saying the right thing in the footnote. But they said, you know what? Well, cause and effect relationship exists because we can see with our naked eyes that the rice seeds produce rice sprouts and the barley seed produce barley sprouts. So they said cause and effect exists. So they must exist intrinsically because that's what we can see. Well, what we see directly cannot be used as a reason to establish intrinsic reality. Yes, conventionally, that's right. Rice seeds are different from rice seedlings, and rice seeds do produce rice seedlings, and barley seeds do produce barley sprouts. But that does not prove or cannot be used to establish intrinsicness or intrinsic reality.
다 니는 다 껴모는 다 되면 달 껴와다 현 껴니 까산 다 니가 껴와 까야 돼. 니는 껴와 뭐는 저범 집발 껴와 달 껴와 인라 장게라서 벌 껴와 현 껴와 뭐고스 너라 양 희진 새로 현디 양소 당이디 여봐 코네 껴이 네 코네 껴와네 코네 껴완데 렘베 레진당 소니 지인 비체 달 껴라 파당 마당 까나 레 껴와네 ene shen jiao da khon le je me je le shen khon le me je ye ga so ba le jiao da di ji bu ba le da khon je ti ge zabum din khon je yin le jul jia de da jia yin shen ji yin jia de ne shen jia yin se ba ro ho ti se wa da pe de phba zai su yi phba ne ene dam ba de ne jia yin zai da jia re da zang ge song ge de de ne shen jia re de te na le jin khon khon sa de sa de so da de dong ge de ba ji bu ba ji da so de gamon ye zan so gamon le shima jia yin de da jia re se di phamal jia de ne shen jia re she da she ni ga jia re she de ko da she de re jie zhong de yo mo ko ni ga jia la ro da ti ko ya tong ge do de ro dong de wo
So we're on page 314, still right at the bottom. And the third subpoint is refutation or production from both self and another or other. And so we have, witnessed refutation or production from self and refutation production from another or other. Now there's a third position, refutation of production from both self and other. And as Geshe explained, Chirpupa, I think James, I hope I'm saying it right. So they assert that, well, we don't have the problem that you're all pointing out with regard to production from self or production from others. Because what we say is a unique kind of thing. We say that things are produced from both self and others. Okay, so we don't have the issue that all the things raised about production from self or production from other, because we said both. Here, we cover the grounds, so to speak. Okay? And then you ask them, okay, how is that? Explain your position, how things are produced from both self and others. So they gave a number of examples. Number one is clay pot, pottery, right? Sorry, Laguna Beach comes to my mind anyway. So a pot, clay pot, they said it is produced from both self and others. He said, how is it produced from self? Well, it is produced from clay. Clay itself is made out of clay. That's the stuff itself, right? So because it's made out of clay, it is produced from itself. And it's produced from others because the potter, right, the guy or the girl, who fashioned the pot is other. So therefore, we say that the clay pot is produced from both self, right, itself, clay, and from the other, the guy, who made it. Okay? And then they also give the example of Devdada, who is produced from both self and others. Devdada is produced from the self, Brogose is produced from something called life essence. According to their philosophy, life essence exists, right, kind of universally, permanently, and that produced the Devdada, okay? So it's produced by itself kind of thing. But then the Devdada is produced by the other because his parents contributed there. Parents, made him. So therefore, Devdada is produced by himself and by his parents. This is how they assert that things are produced from both self and others. In other words, to use technical terms here, is that when we look at the causes and conditions, there is what we call substantial cause, okay? So anything that's produced from its substantial cause, that's it is produced by itself, okay? Clay pot is produced from clay. Clay is the substantial cause of the clay pot, so therefore it is produced from itself. And potter and all other things are what are called cooperative condition or simultaneously producing condition, in Tibetan, and that's other, or those are others. So therefore, a clay pot is produced from both self and others. The same story with Devdada. Okay, it's produced by the life essence, so that is the substantial cause of Devdada, and then it's produced by his mom and dad, so that's the other. So there you go.
Oh, then Narhi Rigway kicked the Galley China, Dayogobi Gala. Here, China, Shinja Gobal, Shinja Gobal Gago, Jubala, Yin Jori, Congress, she didn't talk about it, didn't she lay me, Tinny, the Yemedi. Consider in Georgia, Yemen, she so that the Dollar Jena and Kaja tomato to me tower. Shelly can Tamsi Georgia, no, the hero recovery required the delay, that the Jimba, the Gilean Jati, and the Shenja Karsati, Dal Jot River. That Zabumlas Karsa Jimbala, the Pamal Tears, Shenja over the river, did New Zealand go and what in the Delia, in Jord, Lord Governors, the hero recovery, what the Garang and illegal Jord card over this.
And so at the bottom of page 314 and top of page 315, we have a citation from Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way. And as Krishna explained, so the Chirpuva or Jains, they assert a production from both self and other, and they said that's a unique position. But if we look close up, all the arguments against this production from self and production from others apply equally to their position. They simply asserted that it's from both. Okay? So the arguments that have been laid against production from self include that what's the use of being produced? If something is already produced, it exists, what need is there for it to be produced again, right? And if we still insist that it should be produced, then when does the production end? It becomes an endless job. Produce. It never ends, right? So those are the two main arguments being laid against. Production is meaningless and production is endless. The same arguments go against you because your contention says things are produced from themselves, right? Devdata is produced by himself, and the clay pot is produced by itself, and so there you go. All that arguments apply to you. Now, the arguments laid against production from others is that, just like you say, Devdatas are produced by his parents, so there are others. Well, things that exist intrinsically and intrinsically different, they could not produce each other. If that were the case, then anything can produce anything else, right? There is no rule, cause and effect principles, anything, right? Darkness can produce light, lightness can produce dark, and barley can produce tomatoes, tomatoes can produce, okra or whatever. I mean, those are not examples given, you know what I'm saying? So anything can happen, anything, and that's just one crazy thing, and that whole argument also go against your position, because you also assert in production from others.
어디서 다 무니를 저 뭐하는 세 다디데를 강지 이네 다저 신을 니가 저 기밀 저세요 들어 다디 양변시 뭐하는 사 빼매자 줘봐당스 에는 담에 걸사 잠반나니 가지기 베리시바 마동고 대신데 맞아라서 가지기 손에 카도데 예남 그거 마동고 대지 거보다는 저는 무니를 좋아해요 시나고 다디 양변들이 강제데 빼매자 대임으로 뭐도 빼매자 주보요 임으로 실은 자 주보시 로마 그런 남아디 인자보요 제도 뺨 이와 주보시 있는 남만 전부도 수직 선거요 말아서 그는 야 그는 정신을 깨워서 뭐 들려야 선거요 말이지 대신에 맞은 동들어야 이제 그 총당의 말이지 그런 무슨 일이지 뭐 이제 차도 그 총당의 remote 해가 말아서 세단 뜻마도는데 그런 들게도 가서 저도 무슨 일이지 말이지 스타트 장외로 주메지 왔다 그런
So we're on page 315, the subpoint 4, which is part of the analysis of refuting 4 types of production. The last one is refutation of causeless production, or refuting production from without causes and conditions. Now, who assert this kind of a position that things exist on their own and they don't need any causes and conditions to come into existence? Gyangpenpa or Lokayata, they propound that. And so they give their examples, which they say that look at, the beautiful, lotus. If you look at the lotus, its petals are very delicate and very, smooth to touch. But did you see anybody making those petals, smooth and, very soft? And no. It's just natural, there are no causes and conditions needed. That's what it is. Nature is. Okay, look at the stem of the, the lotus, and the root is supposed to be rough, not like a, soft and, things. Who made that rough? Nobody saw it. Did you see it? No. So therefore, it's just a nature, and it doesn't need any causes and conditions. Or here's a better example: peacock. Peacock has beautiful feathers, Who designed the beautiful feather? Did you see anybody painting the peacock's feathers lately, or anybody designing it? No, it's just the way it is. It is a nature, kind of a thing there. So they say that things exist intrinsically, and things don't need causes and conditions to come into existence. That's the way it is. Look at the nature.
What is that tip gawa the tip me the yumele jena yu the two jena ye jawa di two times the yogola yang gaya me go the you didn't der jola der men you su da 대다기 유유메 때문에 세로서 디지다 다티데 와데 뭐니 저 유메나 에네 두두 가실을 여와도 두두 pen 유 가실을 고금께와 유 가실을 미겨와 유 켜봐 다 튜일시나 야 야르가디 베 동도 제 공감에 제소려 와 디레 유디 켜봐자는 메와 에네 야면도 동도 깨je가 야면은 유디 제 가야 제야 메와 어 대착을 했어. 그래서는 그 유명이라고 유명은 다 근데 거기 얘기해서 어디 제가 유명에는 야는 유디 탐지도 있게야 야는 탐지도 매봐 되게 차로 그래서 뒤에다 저는 유명이 와서 돼 아니 지금은 두세요. 다 그런 사람들은 대세고 먼저 공주 송게가 요마로 빼마 몇도 빼마 그런 술은 깨오래. 근데 말제도 그러게 어디서 로동 깨우러 뭐 이제 매직스 샘지야 총동 그때가 요마로 어디서 거 상어동도 잡고 들어오고 그러.
So how is their contention challenged that things could be produced without causes and conditioned or costlessly? So of course, the Lokayatas are very much confined to what's see here and now, right? And then they said, nobody has witnessed painting the peacock feathers or designing it. So therefore, it's just nature. It doesn't require any cause and conditions. Nobody, has fashioned the petal leaves of the lotus. So therefore, it's just a nature. So what you see is what you said. That's what it is, And so they don't need any causes. Well, if things don't need causes, to come into existence, then there are certain issues. Either they must exist under all circumstances and all time, because they don't need any causes to come, right? Something, if that exists, it must exist forever. So we cannot talk about seasonal changes, things that grow in the summer, not in the winter, or vice versa, right? Things cannot be seasonal, because if things can exist without causes, right, then they should exist either forever or they should not exist at all. They should be completely non-existent. Or we cannot talk about how in some locations certain crops grow or the plant, in other locations they don't grow. Why should it be? Because it should not be any different, right? Under all circumstances, things should just grow or don't grow, And so those are the fallacies being pointed out.
어디 다 생일이 가도 맞은 동지 자로 여발라 서버 겨데 너네 찍게네 탐지를 껴 양은 나야 매겨 줘다 지부터 돈 어디서 왔다 내 생일이 부지다 강가를 돼서 와 근데 자로리야 맞은 동요서 와서 그러면은 자로 맞은 동면서 가래서는 맞아를 누가서 때 유용어라 이 자로면 가래서는 기대시야 뭐 지면 지게는 어디로서 왔더니만 강가 렉델 되세 너네 가지 걔는 탐지 저다 양면은 시 나야 매겨 와 어디래 타와닌 주도 타와닌 주에서 왔다.
So if peacock's beautiful design of the feather and the colors is just nature, doesn't require any cause and conditions, then why can't the crows have the beautiful feather like the peacocks? Why crow is deprived of that privilege? Because it doesn't need any causes, right? The crow's feathers don't have peacock's design and beautiful color, so why peacock has it and crows don't have it? That makes no sense. How do we explain that difference? Why other birds don't have the same beautiful design? So the main the argument that is laid out consists of 2 points. Either things must exist forever and forever in all times and under all circumstances because they don't require any causes, right? They should be able to exist. Or they should not exist at all because if you say that things do change under circumstances, then there is something happening, right? Besides just being, nature.
다 태양에 지부터 배치도 지대보다 지대바가 베게 에는 사진 동도 가래네 생대는 다 대도 저기 가래 동도를 가가 뒤서 더달이야 에니 깔레 시부지안에 엔다고도 왔어 지메를 깨는 에는 곧 깔레 자고도 집샤스 예데도 선시 뒤셔고 왔어 그러 그 탐지도 도면과 지대바는지 매바 도마시와 도면과 조로 죽벌레 이제 개대 지메코나다 이제 저는 대다 타달에 타디게 리중시도 지된데 사본 라서도 야다 고 디바시요 면지 해소사 데다 아니 동도다 아니 간지 싱레링게나다 돌레링게나다 싱도그세 세땅 세 디동리아 깔리싱부자리 휴시고로 어디 자고야면도 그건 런중이 제외는 디 자고야 말바스 다디 자야데 고좀 소사라와 더 고소도 게와테라와
So we are still at the bottom of page 315. There is a quote from Chandagiri's commentary on the middle way. So if things were to exist intrinsically, they could exist without causes and conditions, then either they should be able to exist in all times, under all circumstances, and forever, or they should not exist at all. Okay? And so if that were the case, then all the hardships that the farmers go through, right? They cultivate the crops on the right season, they harvest on the right. All the things they do become completely meaningless because it should not be dependent upon seasons and their efforts and the seeds and all other things because things exist costlessly, isn't it? Okay? But what we witness conventionally is farmers right? They work very hard. They toil the field. There are right seasons to plant the seeds, right time for harvest, need the right seeds, need the right fertilizer, and so on, X, Y, Z. All of this can be something, we see it validly, right? So their position, it undermines the valid experiences and perceptions of the world, because things don't work the way they claim it to be, costlessly. They require a lot of effort, lots of costs and conditions. So therefore, what are the farmers working so hard? They grow fruits, they grow vegetables, they grow crops. Why? They can just have a life, just have fun. I don't know, go to Las Vegas, he didn't say that, but have fun. Why they work hard? Because it doesn't require, things will happen just the way it is,
어제 셰즈 대달 무디 무시jen고 대달 무시jewa 네바 통화라 때네 타실이 자메바 졸라 대라 네 랑신 자메베 차바 나 타신 거베 가서 셰바다 로보 디지 ngo나 랑신 메바 양 대라 때네 예바 조데 데네 tenjur shibe che di shiba le tene jeba jiao yinji ngusu tamja zhebe yonga me do sta tanda jugbe longchan ya tuzo desi wo da roji jiao me jebe ngar shiba gobe kao shiba dar karsa tesi da karsa tene kar taji jiao tone tene taji le me jiao do to ise tela rāngshīn jiā mē wā tā ngū kā mā, tēlā yā tā yī jiā kā, tā yī rāngshīn jiā yu bē rūpshī, tēlā tā yī jiā gu gu rā wā. Tā shē tā tēlā yā rāngshīn jiā mē wā ngū sā rūp yu mā rā wā, ngū sā tā yī jiā mē wā rūp. Tā yī jiā mē wā rūp tā tāng tā, rāngshīn jiā tā yī kā rūng jiā gu wā, tā yī kā rūng mē jiā tā rāngshīn jiā mē wā tā kā rūp rū wā rā wā, wā tī rūp rū wā rēs. ngū sā rāngshīn jiā wā tā ngū sā kā mā rē, ngū sā tā yī jiā wā tā kā mā rēs.
So at the bottom of page 315 over to page 316, the explanation given is that what we have witnessed is the analysis of refuting 4 types of production: production from self, production from another or other, production from self and another, both, and production from neither or costlessly. Okay? So this is called refutation of 4 types of production. Okay. There is no explicit mention of refuting intrinsic reality here, but this 4 types of production analysis of reasoning is used to establish intrinsic reality. Okay. So if we refute the 4 types of production, automatically that should refute intrinsic reality. If something were to exist intrinsically, if something were intrinsically produced, it would have to be produced in one of these 4 ways, right? It should be produced from self, by itself. It should be produced from another or other. It should be produced either from both self and other, or it should be produced without causes conditions, right? When we analyze whether something is intrinsically produced in any of those 4 ways, and we don't find, right, such production, so what we find refuted implicitly or is the intrinsic production, although there is no explicit mention of intrinsicness with these 4 types of production.
다다디 제르버스한테 무슨 정가 메세야디 다 중리에 대해서도 네 많이 셔봤니 타이 요만 셔봤니 가서 그 주제단 제기 가서 랑화탄의 마인드 때까봐 동의 되베죠. 그래서 사이가 타이 교하고 되잖아. 그래서 뭐 타이 교하고는 까리 뭐지 랑이 저거서 까요 뭐 랑이 저거 효를 까 그래서 다 제르버스 어디 주제도 어디 중리에 열어 어디래. 때까봐 동의 되베죠.
So we find the evidence in the commentary on the middle way where the Geshe position is that if we can refute the four types of production, it implicitly or automatically also refutes intrinsic reality or intrinsic existence. Although intrinsic reality existence is not explicitly mentioned in these four types of production, okay? Because the four types of production is used as an evidence or reasoning to establish intrinsic reality. Okay? As we talked earlier, that if something were to be produced intrinsically, it would have to be produced in one of these four ways: from self, from other, from both, without causes. But when we find that nothing is produced in any of these four possible ways, then the conclusion is that things could not have been produced or could not be produced intrinsically. So intrinsic reality is refuted, indirectly, shugden, by the way, kind of thing, if you will, like that. And the evidence is in the Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way, Judel. And so one of the issues that really related to this is in the monastic text, monastic university use, we find the two types of assertions here. Would it be possible to generate inferential valid cognition simply based upon what we call tenjur, consequential syllogism, tenjur? Or must it, or that we must use what is called da yangda, valid reasonings for inferential valid cognition? So we find two positions in monastic texts, right? Some would assert that, well, you don't need to use da yangda or the perfect reasoning, right? That is the word. I usually don't like the word perfect, but I think this is what I will use once. So some monastic text says we must use perfect reasoning, da yangda, to generate inferential valid cognitions, okay? Others say, no, we could use the syllogistic, consequential syllogism, tenjur, right, to be able to generate the inferential valid cognitions.
어디에다 통들이 타기가 통들을 주발 디버와 요모도 영원을 히테스야 어디 송반에 네 태화급이 드불라 따네 에네 따르때 드불라 따르때 제와 시다제 수때마 인제 당본이 치고를 현다들 거 보면 노스다 자와시라고 달만 헬미세 엄마 집에 가서 누워서 대대인 배시 런시미 대대인 배 따고도 어디 거야지 타이게와 태유고 쇼를 때바래 뭐 이제 더보고리야 따야다고요 말이야 태유자 뭐 가고요 말이야 인 집에 가서 내가 거제 다다 현지가 열면 여기는 지티스 런시미 로드가 대대 때에서는 이 에네 탐자기 태유시 그 쇼를 때비 에네 가서 딱 드세고 말이야 쇼보면 좋았고요 말도 이제 지단 다시 교육을 가서 야랑신고비 무송어 말이야 되셔다.
근데 양주순하게 그래서 다시 교육 고급 값으로 와게.
우리 다시 교육을
타이 요것에 대해서 마음에 땡땡이 메시지게 딱 그걸 sin 텐주의 쇼를 끌수 걸게.
텐주를 못데.
알 텐주 못해요.
다 쇼울데다. 다 자연한테 다요 말와. 또 어머 집에 가서 다 거도 와. 땡땡이 메시지 거도 와. 어머 집에 가 땡땡이 거도 가서는 데 다시 교육을 돈 디오드선 디 쇼를 하시면 킹루에서 에디 슈딩 거르마도 무엇이야 이 러시마 가야마 타이죠 그런 가르마도 이제 러시마 뭐 가야 말이야 당기도 송아도 지고래 그래
다시 잡고 공수대 텐주를 땐 가서
텐주 타이지하고 텐주 가도 와 어디 가르미 러시 메바디 가야 말이야 무스
텐주대 다도 쇼를 때는 소스게 we are on still top of page 316. Right on the top, we find two-line citation from Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way, and I quote, "Because things are not produced from self, another, both, or without relying on causes, they lack intrinsic existence," unquote. Okay, so that is the evidence we were talking about earlier, how in the commentary on the middle way, we find evidence about refutation, four types of production, how that implicitly or automatically also refutes intrinsic reality. So in in the four types of production, the kind of reasoning that's used is called what we call syllogistic reasoning, or the consequential syllogism. Okay, teljur in Tibetan. Okay, stick to the Tibetan words better. But the perfect reasoning or tayangda is implicitly stated, not explicitly stated. Whereas in the fundamental treatise, the perfect reasoning is used. Where often we say that sprout does not exist intrinsically because it is dependent arising. Right? Dependent arising is used as a perfect reasoning, tayangda, to establish the lack of intrinsicness of a sprout. Okay? Whereas in all these arguments that we have witnessed in terms of refuting the four types of production, consequential syllogism is used, okay? Not a perfect reasoning or tayangda. But that's implicitly implied.
rāngshīn jiā kākwa tēne ngōpo nām rāngshīn mēwa ngēwa nyi na ngōpo mēwa lāya rāngshīn mēwa ngēwa nyewa lāya chū tamjī yī rāngshīn tōmbar tōkpa ome tāwa dāla tū nyi tō sā tā tī bata tānda xē tā tī kāngā chū chē kāngā tī rī bata ngōpo sā tī ngōpo tī ngā mzu tōngshū nēpa ngōpo tī kāngshī tā shūng tī xē kāngā ngā pē xā tā thārpa tā tōngyī rī tī rī mā tō xē tā pē chī ngōpo kāngā xē kōrī mā yu chū dīmā shī nā kā sō xē tā kā xē yā tōndā yā mā rī bā xē tā pē xā chī xē tā ngōpo tī ngā sī tī tōngshū nēpa ngōpo lī ngē bā nyi sō na tā sō sō phōng bō chō tā tī ngē bā nyi sō na inī ngōpo mē bā nā kā lā sō kā chū tam chī nī tī lā ngē bā nyi rī sī rī bā chū tam chī rā yī tō bā tō bā ome tāwa dāla tī nyi tō sī xē tā chū chī tāng bō tī tō sā nā ngō mē lā tō rī xē tā ome tāwa dāla tī sā na lē lā bū tō nā sā yā jī mā rī bē lē lā bū tō nā tō tō rī sī kō tā kā jī.
So we're in the middle of page 316. So often the topic or the subject that is kind of presented is simply called ngöbo. Literally means functional thing or things. Okay? And of course, things include many things, but here we are primarily concerned with self and our aggregates, right? As we talked about why we are bound in samsara and why we want to be liberated from samsara, or how we could be, is because of our grasping at the intrinsicness of our self and aggregates. It's not so much with grasping at the intrinsic reality of a space, or the outer space, or the cyberspace, Well, there are phenomena, we know, but that's not keeping us in the samsara. What keeps us in the samsara is grasping at the self and aggregates, Once we are able to realize the lack of intrinsicness of either self or the aggregates, or both, right, one phenomenon, then it's a matter of shifting our focus on the other phenomena and understand by the same logic and the power of the logic that everything else also lacks intrinsic reality. So this is why once we really understand, the emptiness of one phenomenon, then it's like the mystery box is kind of open, and now it's easy to understand the reality of all other phenomena because it's the same reality.
어디 셰든 죽발레제 건중고보 때는 랍 용에 또버다 따보면 디지털이 땅에 타다 지어버 시 송바 따 땐리 따 때네 누굴라서 러시아도 뭐 예반이나 니는 코사죠 라 로신드 넘버 세위 중심 지어버 셔오세 다 지던데 다시 랑신 저거 봐서는 다 된저고 비리고 뭐뭐 여러티 디는 애니 땡땡 때는 해셔도 지고리스 제대다 노사가가지야 지고 셔디다 땡땡 야 제시로 때 송구인 쓰고서
No. So in the middle of page 316, we have a stanza quoted from Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way, and I quote, "Because things arise dependently, these misconceptions cannot bear scrutiny. Therefore, the reasoning of dependent arising cuts all the entanglements of bad views or distorted views." I would rather say distorted views, unquote. Okay? And as Geshe explained that, of course, there are many types of reasons or reasonings that we're going to use to understand lack of intrinsic reality, emptiness of intrinsic reality. But among all the reasons, the reasoning of dependent arising or Patit Samudpat, Tyndall, is regarded as the supreme or the best reason. Okay? And so because it is the most effective and powerful reasoning, I think Jenbuji wants to explain it a little bit more.
어디지 다들 시간제 선구에서는 내리 뉴근의 랑고니 이 고트베라시 메데 랑 gelden joy shir pen songye shin she shendaji jeba chao pen cheshi deshi da yang da ngone de de da se de ba ko yugu cheji ro raji me de ro gelden joy shir en pen songye shin ti ta ti de se de ro no ti mi da she shenda jeba chao sa shenda jeba sa na da se da jiba da jeba la yang da pe da le jeba明对啊，这蒙不要是吧？我觉得。
So that, at the bottom of page 316, the opening sentence of the last paragraph, we find it stated what we called Da Yang Da, perfect reason or reasonings. And in a syllogistic form, how it really looks is that a seedling or a sprout is empty of intrinsic reality because it is a dependent arising. So dependent arising is used as a perfect reasoning to establish the emptiness of the intrinsicness of a sprout. For example, just like the reflection of a face in the mirror. Okay? So as Geshe explained, that based on this reasoning, once we understand the lack of intrinsicness of our sprout, then it would become easier for us to understand the lack of intrinsicness of other phenomena.
ene yidel tene ene rubjapoya ta joro tena de ta de hinda se de tena me yang hinda se de pajo pa cha su ke me ne ke ja joro de ma des hinda se da ta yan da ji pa des.
Here's a technical matter. The Ta Yang Da, or the perfect reasoning, is also referred to in this context as Shenda Ji Cheba, which means inferential valid cognition, renowned, known to the others. I mean, it's always bad to translate literally, but sometimes you can't help it. Otherwise, I might put my interpretation here, which is not the right thing. Because what does it mean, Shenda, something known for the other? Well, there are many other meanings, and then there's a whole other debate going on. But in this particular context, what it really means is simply another way to talk about perfect reason, or Ta Yang Da, right? Inferential valid cognition, inferential cheba, inference based upon the other known reason, Shenda, is another way of saying that you are using the perfect reasoning or Ta Yang Da here.
Simjen Namjang Yuan Tang Nai Xue Nang La Teta Nai Loyang Shaba member Tong Teta Chita Nang Taji Rang Wugon Yuding Du Yuban Zebane Rang Shuba Rondozi in La Sita this way Pushu Siwa Taganza make game any she go to Tana T Sunyan de Mediteresa Logic Marati Pushu so and Pig Sunyana Kazeto Dingone Sanagati me in that long boy in the onion zingiro, Tenashinganzo, Toy Modo, what the Chukarana, the Teddy Rangi Nangoris, or Joa, or Duluka, Dulu on the Yod Marity, in a Rodo at the Doris. Tati Rangi, Tenda Rangu, the Rangita, Rang Toyin, but Tenda, you general. 11 gates. Oda today you know say what now that you know in the good the pendas Jawa take maris, for Ramon the other road took up the other, Hell Ramalavinza, in the Yuna take Marava. That you did then in the round the Yomaris. Because 10 days around you to Bani Gawarava. What you going that do?
So we're still at the bottom of page 316. So we have this perfect reason put in the syllogistic format. A sprout or seedling lacks intrinsic reality because it's a dependent arising, just like the reflection of a face in the mirror. Okay, that's the whole syllogism, and with the example. And so when we work with the example first, there is a difference the way we, the adults, perceive reflection of a face in the mirror, and a child perceives reflection of face in the mirror. A child who has not yet developed the concept and the linguistic terms ability, when he or she looks into the mirror, really sees that I'm in the mirror, right? Because it's just me. I mean, that's real. Okay? It does not differentiate. Well, that's a reflection. It's face of the. It has no language, no concept. It's just I'm in the mirror. Okay. Or even maybe it doesn't think I'm in the mirror. That's me there. Whereas with the adults, we know what looks like me is not in the mirror, but it just looks like me reflecting back, right? We are able to differentiate the reflection from the real face. So in the same way, with the ordinary sentient beings, for us, things appear to exist intrinsically and objectively as if everything is over there, right? Nothing is really contributed from this side, subjectivity. Things appear to exist right there, and that's the way it is. Okay? And if things were to exist objectively and intrinsically out there, like in that fixed entityness, well, then that doesn't require any causes and conditions, isn't it? Because it just exists. So, how should I say, intrinsically and independently, you know? So, if the things were to exist just the way they appear to exist intrinsically to us, there is no need for the cause and conditions for them to bring into existence. But that's not the case, isn't it? Things are dependent upon cause and conditions, so which means that dependent arising, and intrinsic reality are mutually exclusive. If something exists intrinsically, it could not exist dependently. If something exists dependently, it could not exist intrinsically, because they are mutually exclusive terms or categories, isn't it?
No, that is because this is that you can't level take though, because Dortuna in Penna Meloda did a she Martin and called Sunyaja Marwa, or said that Kenan the Karsina Kayama, that you can't only go Sunyaja Murwa. Said that Yamazuna in the Melo Mesa that she never did Sunyasha Yomarwa. She said that in the Eugene Tevati, Eugene Tevas took up say I think God over what Ranhit was a major. She said the thing got in that Kajikaya. That Melon did the workers, Eugene Ten, I think I wasn't to draw. So Melon men, Sunyasha Mari, Eugene Madon Yomarwa. What did that thing was you the chain in the Gawa?
So working with this reflection of a face in the mirror is a very good example for us to work with, because this is something we can directly confirm and experience how even for our face to be reflected in the mirror, number of things have to come into existence, causes and conditions, isn't it? It just doesn't happen that way. Well, there has to be a mirror. Well, the mirror has to be a clean mirror, nice mirror. Well, if you don't stand in front of the mirror, well, your face is not going to reflect on it. So something is missing, isn't it? Well, there has to be light. Well, in the darkness, things don't shine on anything else. So because what does that tell us? Well, there has to be a mirror. It has to be a clean mirror. You have to be in front of the mirror. There has to be light. It has to be precise. All of these things show that even for the reflection of the face to appear in the mirror, it depends on many causes and conditions. So if it does, that means that it could not exist intrinsically and in a very fixed way, isn't it? So that we can easily understand and verify, you know.
Oh, this is what did that you just want to run given you don't carry the Mingan and the true simple Pumba line. You like Mugo Kelang the Mero in was it that you can't do man. In a guessing a young joy, you gave just last over a young joy with the was, but don't do subject, Pumba in the Damascus, which young John Jam in the was. Gyeltsen government yang Geshe was. The Guzu never said. That even Kundi Hijabali. Can't let ten Jung Yuba, then a Ram Minjuro. The good Ram Mevate, then da the year mines, or the Hijabali and the Songas. Can't ten Jung behind, but then around your maris. Say the shirt of the tensions on the shirt of the Ranshi your maris. Set a da your maris, run here about your maris, or that is your maris.
So we're on top of page 317 with a citation from Aryadeva's Chetuk Shedak, Shivjaba of 400 stanzas. And I quote, that which arises dependently does not exist autonomously. All of these things lack autonomous existence, therefore they have no self, unquote. So as Geshe explained, that if something already exists or if something already produced, there is no need to be produced it again. If it should be produced again, then there is no end to the production and it's a meaningless production, isn't it? Yeah. If a vase already exists, well, it doesn't need to be brought into existence again. Well, it already exists, you know. So if something depends on other things to come into existence, that kind of dependent existence precludes or it excludes autonomous existence or intrinsic existence. Yeah? As we said earlier, dependent arising, tenjung, and intrinsic existence are mutually exclusive categories. So if anything exists dependently, that thing cannot exist intrinsically or autonomously. Yeah? Everything dependent arising is empty of autonomous existence or intrinsic existence.
That is hijab and Jandanje, the Dawal Dena, Karango, Tarashi, the Rama, the Shinla Ramala, but round the trip at Jojo, your Maina. Did you touch Jojo Yino? They took over Kala, then Joa, then around the Menjute, you the chain ra lady Geshe, the good Rama, the taking over Kala, that the Rashi Maino shares so that the Tata Hijab take the Geshe. The Go Kanda and Shenla Ramaleva and around the Yomari Karsana. Roller Chuba be Karsa. Della round Trube, Day Joa, Joa Yo minus, that round to you know, and Day Joa Dreamer was. Moving was the Tona di Ganga, Day Joa Red was. The Rashi Yomaris, or did the Joa direction.
So in the middle of page 317, we have Great Master Chandrakirti's commentary on Aryadeva's 400 stanzas that just quoted earlier. And as Geshe explained, that something that depends on other things for its existence, that thing could not exist independently, autonomously, and intrinsically. If something were to exist autonomously, independently, and intrinsically, then that thing could not be a dependent arising because that thing does not need anything else at all. Okay? But if we check with our own everyday kind of valid experiences, we know that things are dependent on many other things for their existence and for their functioning.
Senane tikana ne randela tomugo bada tike yo ometa ni mugobe jomini yudu rangu ko ne nganzu rangzu tabi dulu la rawan shaw ta di rawan se ade ni tanda tende se ade jul rang jul ke gonge de tende se ade chötamji ene tende se ni na tanda ta to ten shagdo se ta the Ramasiade in the Gilra level, the Dibigula, the Tigra level, Jumaris. Dibigula level, the Toa Tangi Tonu Toto Maresti, in the Nambit of the Gilra level, Shagora. That the Tobeta was a tennis, Tegulo, Teddy Tamusha was a what the shower,
So we are on page 317 towards the bottom where you find the sentence, autonomous means something appears to be intrinsically existent, and when it does so, it appears to those same consciousnesses as not depending on other phenomena, and it exists as it appears, unquote. And so here, of course, we're dealing with how if something is dependent on cause and conditions for its existence, that thing could not exist autonomously, independently, and intrinsically. If something were to exist autonomously, intrinsically, independently, then that thing could not be a dependent arising, does not need causes and conditions. Okay. So much of what we have discussed is, based upon cause and effect relationship of things. That said, if we understand that things are dependent on causes and conditions for their existence, that does not necessarily mean that we realize or we understand emptiness of intrinsic reality. To understand or realize the emptiness, the emptiness in them is empty inside real, okay, because others have to repeat the whole long sentence, that kind of a tongue twister. Emptiness, we have to understand that things are merely labeled, right? The kind of dependent arising, the subtle meaning which is propounded by Prasangika Madhyamikans, right? How everything is merely labeled by terms and concepts. So we understand, that that tells us that things could not be autonomously existent, intrinsically existent, independent, because everything is dependent upon terms and concepts and the labeling part. Then we will be able to access what emptiness is.
주제사 시작 저와리자 롱하면 조일 뒤에 때인 저와종 롱의 뭐의 제외시 롱의 뭐의 제외 동반이 동인지 탐지 뭐보면 동 뭐는 해송소사 세다디 다디 뭐볼 때는 뒤동마레스 뒤동마레 가르잖아 탐지 동반이 동이스 그가 랑시 뭐로 동이스 거와 롱하면서 랑시 뭐로 이제 동이게 오레스 탐지 ngōbō 돈에 많이 넣었어. 어디서 다들 ngōbō 때리대 말이 디 때리대 가래 러시 동바트리.
So here the autonomous, refers to the absence of intrinsic reality. It does not mean the absence of conventional things, isn't it? Okay, autonomous here means the absence of intrinsicness or intrinsic reality, not absence of functional things or conventional things. And so we will stop there on page 317. Please make sure to mark it well because I will be gone for a couple of weeks, and so I don't want to lose the track of this. And then we will catch up with this. Now, yes, Geshe is very eager with your questions and observations or clarifications we need to do. Yeah.
Thank you. So if something is like inherently existence, can it be like perceived or observed?
Okay. Kesi ane chö kanshi rangshin ge dubu na so ge. Ane chö de ane yujing ge ta tu ge ba ma le so ge. Yujing ta yu be chö ji ge ma le so. Kesi chö rangshin dubu na da ge. Ane di ka zang ge yu yujing xie xie ro ba. Di nam sha ru so ba de xie ane di yujing ta tu ge ba nyong tu ge ba so ba.
this is a huge way that is when you say don't 가도 너 또도 가 영어는 가 너야 또야 뭐 뒤니까 사로 그러와 그러와 때에는 때에 유연 좀 또가시 만전 또가면 그러와 저기 좀서는 진짜 때가 몇 사로 뒤에 영어는 또도 가 영어 너야 또야 뭐 제가 그러와.
So if something hypothetically speaking were to exist intrinsically, and if it were perceived or experienced, then that experience perception should either exist forever, there should not be any change, or it should not have been perceived at all. because there's no need for cause and conditions rule here, right? If something exists intrinsically, either exists forever, that means it should be perceived forever in that way, or it should not have been perceived in the first place. Yeah, so because usually, conventionally speaking, when things, cause and conditions come together, assemble, things happen, right? We experience it. Cause and conditions dismantle, things dismantle. We don't perceive it. So that kind of a fluctuation change should not be there.
So, kind of going with what she was saying, a clarification on the answer. So, if something were to exist intrinsically, then it wouldn't be able to be directly perceived. That's the clarification, because then as soon as it's perceived, then it's dependent on the perception.
Okay. Morangi tanda shubi dila dewa tabi narwage kisi takwa tasun wangdo cho rangshin dubda yunarwage and cho di yujengi tawa ina and cho di yujengi tempa chegoro kwa tawa shenya yo marwasa rwage chego marwasa nguisum tawa marwas kisi rangshin dubda takwa tasun yoba ina raba cho di ane kasa da yujengi rwage nguis tawa tuku marwasa rwage tawa ina and cho di yujengi teo nikar wachado rwage
다 그래서 또 왜는 다 똑똑한 나 유도 유진 저하면 그 당보 저도 누룽도 냠도 저도서
근데 유진기 예와시에 거를 말자 찍어 차로 그러와 유진세는 유로
단다 딱바 타송신 세고
딱바 타송신 세고
또야도 요마라 근데 또야 얘는 야면 똑똑한 야면 짱도가면 그러지고
유진 남자 시에 요마라
편지 또접도 매려와 매도 어디 해야 요마라
Well, I think the Geshe response, and maybe I should clarify in this, where he said that if something were to exist intrinsically, and it were perceived as experience, either would have to be perceived experience forever, because that thing should last forever, or it should not have been perceived in the first place. You're right. I mean, they said, then, what that entails is there cannot be duality between subject and object, because the perception has to be part of the intrinsic object. So there cannot be dependent, relationship. If something were to exist intrinsically, hypothetically speaking, right, then it could not be perceived directly. If it were, then you're right. It's dependent on something, and that cannot dependency. Either the perception is part of the object, so it is the object, right? So, yeah.
어디 남자의 갑단데 여러 가라 도와줘할 말림 뜨면은 야면 뒤탐지 요구 그래 야면은 남의 매고 그래 다 당해라 그다 뜻이 지바래 가지 지바래
In the Pramana Vartika text, or valid cognition text, there's a reasoning being used with example of how where there is smoke, there is a fire, right? Which means smoke is dependent on the fire. If the smoke does not need to depend on the fire, so either there should be smoke forever and it should be perceived, or there should not be fire, smoke at all. So that's the same reasoning we're using here.
From my perspective,
Yes.
dependent arising is a very simple concept because we can't think of anything that isn't dependent arising. And yet, emptiness, how do we get from dependent arising to emptiness? It seems like we have to go through some type of analysis more than just thinking about any object in the physical plane that exists from dependent arising. So, I mean, we spent months and months talking about basically dependent arising, and yet what is the jump, the logical jump that gets you to an understanding of emptiness from understanding dependent arising?
Okay, sure. Thank you. Quran kan show the this go again.
Yes.
Ne kaso kore tende se di chik chide ro wage. Quran sam ko de bur stu ro wage. Tende mai mi church sam tan khoya mi jor chire ro wage. Yene tongban yi se chakko shib ro wage. Se sa ani tanda ba dang she de da tende ja she de ro wa sa ge. Yene tende de da de wa ji so so nyong go yo re tong go chur de ro wage. ina tongpa ni ko wat le tu mu dro wa ge se sa di paru de ya ko thuga chya ko sa res ro wa dine thuga de ya de la da ka so ro nga zen che ba che ku yu be ne de ro wa ge khande che wa de nga zo ten de me church sam ko ya mi do sa ro wa ina tongpa ni de ka ga dan to go yo ma ro wa ge se sa di ni paru thuga de khande chya ko ro wa ge ten de ha ko be ne tongpa ni de ko ma zo de ko ro wa ge
re 다디 자외에 시에는 가자 문제야 저다 근데 랑이 쳐봐 있는데 데모터 찍발이다 그 좀에 간제 쳐보데 어디 데모터 주제서야 돼 힘고 그러와 데모터 주제서야 돼 시, 주제 돼 시에서는 인 소소 보이 롤차비 간제 차거든 텔레 힘주시네 남샤 윤도 소로 차당시 인 디레 공주 망부 시인 인 소소 비게 통마면 당진 진당저 텔레 간제 차거든 어찌와시 디엔 디네 아 딘데 디네 카르사 안 카르 그게 남가다 소소 소사야 좀 제바전이라다 어 딘데 뭐뭐 마시바 아니 또서 말지 카르사는 카르사 지지 솔무소 맞어 지지 돈이 다바 또 뭔지 써야지 문제가 힘잡아 줘도 와 제가 먼저다다 댄사서 가디에는 domba 동시야 되고 수강가 어디 동복군 땅에 땅 되고 뭐라 동복 동바동 지시고라 어디 가 초사야 더 나시고라 어디를 제도 초사고 제정신은 되려다 댄데서야 하고 다 배이 간게 켈지다 댄데인데 다 덴바 좋아서야 한다 랑이 좋아서야 돼 그래서 댄데 뭐요 축도 버서고라 다 군인 교사사 그래봐 다 축도 돼 있는 분들 딱 이제나 다 덴바 좋아서야 축도 되게 샤샤 인데 분들 제와시 다 댄데는 축도 뭐요 축도 내리면 샤르고라 제가 군인 공기를 배우는데 다 인데 축도 이해하면서 그 매의 댄데인 신실다 축도 뭐고도 산 그게 네번 이해할 수는 답이 돈이 도로 원내셔
No, sure. So Geshe like says is that I think where we all probably need to work with is in trying to get this clarity and clear image of what is intrinsic reality. Okay? And in this context, let's not complicate it. Let's we use the term true existence, intrinsic existence, the synonyms, right? They all mean the same thing. Yeah? And so what it really means is we have to have this clear image in our mind, as much as we can, clarify that in mind. If something were to exist intrinsically, let's say it don't exist, right? Let's say if something were to exist intrinsically, how must it exist? Okay? How should it exist? What should it look like, if you will? Yeah. So what we have heard so far is that if something were to exist autonomously, intrinsically, it must exist with that kind of fixed entityness, that it is not dependent on anything at all, right? It doesn't need anything for its existence. It can withstand everything on its own. Yeah? So we have to have that clear image in our mind. So once we have that, then we have to kind of check with our everyday experience, do things exist in that way or not? Do things exist autonomously, intrinsically, just the way I have, clarified in my mind? If things were to exist in that way, let's say, then things could not be dependent arising, because dependent arising implies, relationship among things, right? And if things, let's say, are dependent arising, then they could not be autonomously, intrinsically existent just the way they appear to our mind or our perception. Okay? Because, as we said, dependent arising and intrinsic existence are mutually exclusive. Okay? If something exists dependently, it must necessarily be, there's a logical provision that it could not be intrinsically, truly, autonomously, independently existent. It could not be. Okay? If something were to exist independently, autonomously, intrinsically, then it could not be a dependent arising. That's just clear cut, because they are mutually exclusive things, right? So as you said, it's easy, if things are dependent arising, by experience, then it could not be intrinsically existent. The way we are stuck with emptiness is because of that, we still don't have the clarity of intrinsicness in our mind, right? Because we still not sure how things appear to us as being autonomously existent, intrinsically existent. So we have to really clarify that in our mind image, and then we can analyze it. whether things exist in that way or not. And we will find out that things don't exist in that mode or in that appearance or perception. So that's the connection link. Until we miss that clarity, so we won't be able to connect. Dependent arising seems to be easier to think about, but emptiness seems to be quite a far-fetched thing. So I think it depends upon what we call precisely identifying the object of negation, right? The intrinsicness. What does it mean? What should it be? What must it look like? That's what we have to clarify in our own mind, and then do the analysis. So the last thing is that, so if things were to exist intrinsically, autonomously, let's say, right, then it should be findable, right? We should be able to find it, pinpoint it. Wow, there it is. But under analysis, with that image in our mind, we couldn't find it, right? What does that mean, unfindability? The unfindability does not mean things don't exist at all. What it means that it does not exist intrinsically, which we always believed it does. That's how that misconception is dismantled. So that's the connection. Once we understand that things don't exist intrinsically, that is the emptiness. Understanding emptiness. So I think we have to work with our kind of contemplation, analysis, meditation, clarify that thinking, in our mind. Give to yeah.
I understand that when I see anything, just thinking about for a moment, I understand that it has to be dependent arising.
Yes.
But I also know that I perceive it to be truly existing.
Yes.
I mean, everything.
Uh-huh.
So what kind of analysis do we go through to eliminate the perception of true existence?
That's right. Yeah. Quran this is the Quran ki chue tam ja samul tang bro wage. Ane tende yin ba ni ha ko ngar chik do sar wage. Ina so ki ta jimbeng wen te ban chue tam ja tembar du ba wage. Yin ba de ha ko to wa. Ta sa tembar ju be jin dang di pha ta ka so gore. 좀 야세 버와게 제들 제바데 다 가르치고 가서 저 탐제 소소스 이제제 템버두도 섬 이제제로 와게 섬로 단도 가라 땡땡 이마다 하고 그러봐 제자다 이제제 데데 거 매버차 되도록 와게 제바로부터 가르치고 그래서 와게 뭐 디피 투거도 접두고 말 와게 그러봐 섬로 단도 하고 내가 이제 아니 그 소와 거래 나는 템버두대로 와게
디데다 리바땅디잖아 매대어도 양 샤셔도 요 되게서 셔오르와 이게 디다디 데르셔다 다들 찍 타디에서야 된거 찍디디 된지 매배
no
거기 대마도서 것도 나야 찍다 수셔도 무엇이 다 뛴다 되고는 장사 가봐도 풍부 때문에 요네 가네도 먼저 따네 세운다 풍부 그디 남들이 봐 가사라
no
어다 풍부 찍 타디 동시 가야 니야미 짜니 매나 디다 남들 수 남긴 진당 그러데这瀑布定在瀑布的这个地方，它的没，咋的没得？它有的那挺大的有，那说是瀑布定的有过是吧？没现大定是安安山的有嘛是吧？现在说是瀑布定的那山呢，那咋的满人的大门头上，那个叶这些，前面踏着不接头呢，那东西多大感觉？我听不到多少嘛。
So Geshe said, I mean, you said it right, that at the intellectual level, we kind of can, contend that things are dependent arising, right? Nothing is not dependent arising. I can't find one. But deep at the deep down bottom, our belief is so strong in the intrinsic or true existence of things. So there's a disparity between what we know intellectually and what we believe wholeheartedly in our heart. So how can we dismantle that belief or the misconception is then I think we have to go through that kind of analysis that we have talked about, right? Either you can use the reasoning of singularity and multiplicity, right? Chik do that. Let's say, if we work the self, if self were to exist autonomously and intrinsically, then it would have to exist in one of the two ways. There's no third option, right? Either it would have to exist as being one with or identical with my aggregates. That's a singularity, isn't it? They have to be just the same. And we analyze it, whether it is one with aggregates, and we realize it is not, right? Now, does it exist intrinsically as being different from the aggregates? Multiplicity, right? Self is different from the aggregates. Well, we couldn't find it to exist either in that way. So at the end of the analysis, what we come to see is, well, self exists, and my self does not depend on other people's body and mind aggregates. It has to be dependent on my own aggregates, isn't it? So my belief in some kind of a truly existent self is just a misconception. It is not there, isn't it? So that's how we analyze it when we come to the conclusion that self exists, but it does not exist intrinsically, either as one with the aggregate or as different from the aggregate. So therefore, there is no intrinsic self. So that absence of intrinsic self, realization or the conclusion, so that is about emptiness, isn't it? That's what emptiness is. So I think it requires us to go through that kind of meditation analysis in our own mind, So we talked about the sevenfold chariot analysis, right? If a chariot were to exist intrinsically, it would have to exist in one of these 7 ways. And we test it, whether it exists in any of those 7 ways, we conclude it doesn't. So the conclusion is not that chariot does not exist. It exists dependently. It does not exist intrinsically as we always believed in. Now we shift that analysis to the aggregate and to the self, right? And the self will exist intrinsically. It would have to exist either one with the aggregates or different with the aggregates. And when we analyze and couldn't find it, the conclusion is not that I don't exist or self doesn't exist. The conclusion is that self does not exist intrinsically. So that's how our belief system is challenged, and we have to do it over and again, right, to be able to connect the theory and the practice, the intellectual understanding with the gut level analysis,
당신 피지게 휴에서 남들 타는 세제 가도 당신 간제 위에 다도 가려 센티어 시고다 간지 소소지고 타면 질 인다 소소피게 도 저거제 삼로 아시라 약부 매어셰 디데지는 다 풍부한가데 현에 야 풍부한가다 소소 두자되니까 예고 생이 중나 딱 봐서 그거다 딱 봐서 예야 삼로 줘라 봤어 다 소소 풍부한가 너가 파가 때네 야가 쓸랭게지 다다다 풍부 로사서 디데지서 거다 다 혼내서 디데지서 거다 소소 풍부 두자가 파테 and ya si lenge de phongpol ma de ge da le ma so me o de de ji da ini khasa dang ji se de de ji ko se thang se ji ya
in a text called Thalam Subject, Illustration of the Path to Liberation, I think I remember saying this the last year or sometime, that how do we know or feel or have a sense that we grasp at the intrinsic self? Okay, and what I said based upon that text is this: that somebody, let's say, who kind of looks ugly, and who is kind of doesn't feel low self-esteem, good about himself or herself, and then thinks about somebody else who is handsome, beautiful, and intelligent is going to switch with me, right? I want to have that body, beauty, everything. I want to switch it, and I want to give away my body. I want that better, beautiful body. And I don't want my lousy mind. I want that intellectual mind. If you have that sense, that means we are really grasping at the intrinsic self. Because we think there's a self that's apart from my body, right? My body is ugly and yucky, and I want a better body. And my mind is kind of slow and sluggish. I want that intelligent, super-duper DNA mind, and I want to change it. So if that sense we have, that means we are grasping at the intrinsic self that's independent of our aggregates, that it can do the switching, it can do the business here, get a better one and get rid of the bad ones, the old ones, So that's how then we have to really kind of look within and try to get a sense of that intrinsic self. And earlier, Geshe said something I forgot, sorry, that was so important. Based upon there was 400 stanzas, for us to be able to really get at emptiness, part of answering to your question is not only for us to engage in intellectual exercise analysis, but we also really need to accumulate a lot of merit, because if we lack merit, our intellectual analysis alone may not get us there. That's why in the monastic universities, we do a lot of debate, but we also spend a good deal of time doing prayers and purifications. That whole prayer purification is to be able to purify negativity and accumulate merit, because intellectual exercise alone is not adequate to connect with the emptiness. Yes.
I have this clarification
Sure.
about Bob's question.
Yeah.
His question, if I remember correctly, was that what kind of analysis overcomes the perception of true existence? Now, isn't it the case that actually analysis never overcomes the perception of true existence? So there's no, the answer would be there's no analysis that overcomes
right.
perception of
Yeah,
true
yeah, yeah.
existence.
Okay.
It only overcomes conception, not perception.
Oh, yes. Like this, what Quran the pena the what attended the Rashima Rubala Yake, Jeba Cheb in the Ravake. Jeba Cheba Digi, Jeba Quaragi, Dirwake, Casor, Tangzin La Ravake. Dirota Cason, the Tenzin La Ravake. Tenzin never so to go Marwas. Jeba Ched Cotablam Ravake. Jeba Ched Cotablam Ravake. But this never sweaty Coda Caso Shamdas Ravake. Tapata Lamas, Tamet of Sheriff Ravake. Jeba Quaragi, that Tenzin never case to go Maraso. Dirwake.
다 제바 샤디 탑놈라래. 제바 신 뭐도 도 말아. 저거 탑놈을 쳐보러. 다 제바 신 리브를 가려고 다 가서
Tamet Sheriff.
다 당박권 비게 샤이를 지금 대기야 상무 비게 간대 일단 다시 거기 당박 여면은 풍부지 여면 타디 다츠다 나나나 이틀 유엔 다 뒤에 가는지 매나에는 거 매라 다가서 치료나 인간도 다다바 풍부 로드 여말 왔다 리버로 도거로 다 이제 있는 풍부 되는 연 풍부지 연 풍부 타디 뒤에 가르면 이러요 말아 다 뒤에 가르면 누가 때도 다 풍부지나 누지 왔다 타디나 데메서 이러 지도도 다 타도 쉬어도 말이야 다 민득생하지 됐어도 와 근데 소소 심지에 라이나 되게 찍다 롱바디는 라이나 아니 다 롱바디 고유 파선 세네 왔다 롱바디는 민득섬 되게 타도 쉬어라 뭐 진짜 쉬어 그래서
You're right. The analysis is like the process we go through, right? It is the method. It is not something that overcomes that belief system we have. But it's through that analysis, right? We generate the right kind of conclusion or the understanding. That, as Geshe said, that first we try to have this clarity of what intrinsic self looks like or should be, and then we analyze whether such a self exists or not. And if it does exist, it must either exist as being identical with the aggregates, singularity, or it must exist as being different from the aggregates, multiplicity. So when we analyze in those ways, the conclusion that we have is, right, I couldn't find it exist either two ways. That conclusion itself, right, that is the antidote, so to speak, right, beliefs, not the analysis itself. Yes, go ahead.
So, okay, let's call it the end of analysis.
Right,
then.
end of analysis.
The end of analysis.
Yeah. The outcome.
The outcome overcomes belief system.
Right.
Yeah, but it still doesn't overcome. My point is that the question was about perception of true existence. Even the end of analysis doesn't overcome perception of true existence.
The grasping, right. Yeah, okay.
Not the grasping, not the grasping.
Perception, right.
The perception.
Yeah,
okay.
right.
So even there's no such analysis.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. That was the question.
Gotcha. I like this one. Tanya di bezo. Tandang adu di cheba chede jor wage.
Okay.
Ta che idu kan liya ta temper drube gi ro ta second di mindu kan chigle se ta de manye bar wage. Mindu samba di gi sa ala odire ge. Ta ko tenzin de la wage. Ta ko di ta je ne ge yube ne tandang adu temper drube nang de jor wage. Di la ko ka sa di gi ka so ta nyibu chago mar was wage. Nang de ko ta tiru na.
나도 나도 나고 이제 배나 데려와 가서 다 나데나 그럼 매번 하 거다 열어와 근데 가르에서는 네가 데려오셔다 가서 배는 티네제는 통과 서버나 열어와 시고 남기 통과 가로 임베인자 다그 서버 나한테 나게 그 서버 많이 받고 하고 걸어 어디 지금 벌써 상루 나갈 다고 나야 서버 나들와 건다 그 서버 말해서 그 이거 서버에서 네가 말봐 뉴용거로 왜나 그 되지 그거다 나야 자로 말봐 상제디 뭐 나 타요 말봐 어다 타진다 나야다 되게 유니지니 되게 라마도 모르지 다수도 하고 그러라.
Right.
어디 하고는 다 비지.
Ale ta chijin sungyin da bacha gor wa
어,
ge.
진짜 어디서 어디서 저거.
Now you're right. Yes, I mean the analysis and even the conclusion is not overcoming the perception, right? The perception exists until we reach enlightenment, but once we reach that conclusion, so then I think we reach at a point where it's like we know about the reflection face in the mirror, right? It looks like me. I know it's my reflection. So like that, things appear to me as being truly existent. That's my perception, but they really don't. So our belief system, right, is different. So it's just the example of somebody who's suffering from jaundice, right, sees the snow as being yellow mountain. While a person in the belief, like, well, the snow can't be yellow. It's just that my affliction makes me look at that, right? That's the point. Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
근데 거대하게 다다지 해야 되라. 너는 섬도 고유들고 컴바서 거라고 보는데.
No.
그러와.
No.
거기는 컴바 거라고 해 노산도 삼바 정말아.
No, 네.
서로 나자 이제 나 고유 거서 그러면 컴바 거라고 거서 말아.
No, 네.
어디 소리지? 지발다 다지
So I think through that analysis, we develop the conviction that things don't exist intrinsically, but all those things might appear to ourselves. Like, it's just like the people who feel, I think, the seasickness, right? So you see that things are kind of the house is moving or rotating, but in reality, house is not moving. It's just that my motion sickness is making me throw up and look like that, So that kind of thing. So we have a conviction inside that things are not that way. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes, Bob.
So can you say that by the accumulation of merit
Yes,
and the analysis that you go through,
yes,
that the combination of those two, at some point, it's like the realization it like springs into your mind. It's like you've laid the groundwork,
yes.
and then it's like intuitive almost,
Okay.
that it just kind of springs into your mind. Is that what
Okay.
could be said?
Okay. That this would again, Dana Ganzo, that on 1 year Jabba chair again, Gautam with the Yaguchi chair, and it and the Jabba Namdu Ribandaka chair again.
어디
Then the chair to got in a sonam gate Gab Shaw or somewhere again.
어디
Says that sonam gate Gab Shaw, but sonam Sagi Sagi Jabba chick those two another again.
어디
Imagine go Taparani get that Sony Tunjan Zomner again.
어디
And Tombani got to hide those chick yonder girl, was the mother that was in the Hago again.
어디
Thought they could talk about the mountain for a showing girl, so that would be sound with the Corona.
어디 샤용 거래 다 들에다 가슴도 루지어 가게 개인서가 신에 에네 또르셔 가게 견제가 한다도 또르셔 되는데
No.
미지지를 가서 다 또서래서 자직도 저래 가요 그 소음소 먹고시 소음도 터부터 또 살아
No, so. Yeah, Geshe says, yeah, so through the accumulation, two types of accumulation, right, merit and the wisdom analysis, I think when all the two types, right, the realization comes forth. So it's no such thing, I'm ready for that, it's going to now. It's not like, there's many stories about how somebody's climbing up the stair and then realize emptiness. It just happens anytime. Or somebody just goes through the garbage and then realize emptiness. It has no rhyme or rhythm. It's just when the cause and conditions, right, come together, that happens, yeah.
그 휴니오세 까드모 휴니오세 라마스도와 어디 피디 개인서가는지 피디 또르세도 어디 터부터 또 거지
Awesome. One of the Kadamba masters, actually, I have never heard this name, so it's new, but called Shunubir, right? I think he just went to throw a garbage and then he realized emptiness, that moment is so precious to him, yeah. Okay, that's a good point to stop auspicious reasons, so let's hope for that. They such also get the auspicious, so I'm going to stop at a good auspicious one. When I return, feel inspired. I don't need to inform you this, so you have amazing translator in my absence, Geshe here, but just, people sometimes feel like I disappear, many times. I will be out of a country, go to India for volunteer teaching. That's what I do. I have workaholic. 2 weeks teaching in India, so I will be back by, I think, January 17th or something. So after that Sunday, I will be back. So until then, I leave you in good hands. Gange londe dimye
Jen
dinde
Ninda
ninda namda
Nanda
roseve jinye dungwe jishin sije nije duka lebom zen
Kanda
kanda
Seve
sebe
Sangra
chanro
Mari
mari
Munda
mendo
Dungan
lume
Seve
lodo
Dozo
kula
Kula
buje
Buje
taze
Taze
yanla
Yala
tuju
Dozo
yang den son
Dursa
duda
Shiro
shero
Nimo
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 nyelo
Leje
leje
Chadro
charo tu
Tadeshe
mari
Mari
meze
Muse
dunge
Dungan
nyugo
Yuwe
chinye
Chinye
chunze rade nam
Dene
dene
Taji
tase
Saji Tasun Yon Den Lunso Jese
Yeze
Tawo
tuwe go
Jo
chuda
Chita
chuda
Chita Chita
chunyi yende
Dalu
dalu meze
Muse
jambe
Jambe
yang
Yang La
la de om arabaza na di om arabaza na di zenden kye
Kira
kenra
Wese
weze
Je
ye dalu
Dalu
temo
Temo Mumba
membar Kada
Tenje
denje
Shulu
shunglo tongpa
Toba
ye
Lo
lo de
So
bo
Bobe
na wan
Na
ze
Tse Do
do se lo de ya zi yu
Zo
zhong pe ga
Pega
jing
Jege
ye zang
Zang
tong we
Pongwe
xu
Chi
do
Di
me
Minba Xie
tenpa
Tenpa
zin
Zin
la
La
wan do
Ondo
ji
Ji
shu be
Shobe
tang
Tanyen
nian shu
Shogun
gun kyo
Cha La
so
So
wan de page 21 obeisance to my guru and protector Manjushri who holds at his heart a scriptural text symbolic of his seeing all things as they are whose intelligence shines forth as the sun unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for its only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages, achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha. I bow down to you, Manjushri, Omara Bazanati, O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. 31. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate beings, your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, O Lord Sang Tenzin Wangda, respectfully I pray.
Nhất tâm kính lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, bậc đại trí ngài điều phục hai chướng ngại, tự nhật quan lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng chân nghĩa màu rốt ráo, từ tim ngài bát nhã kinh thủ hộ nhiệm màu, cõi luân hồi chúng sanh thọ nghiệp báo, bị ngăn che bởi phiền não vô minh, sở hữu 60 pháp âm thù thắng, cùng đại bi ngài hóa độ chúng sanh, tựa từ mẫu chăm lo cho quý tử, tiếng rồng vang ngài thức tỉnh hữu tình, thoát khỏi vòng luân hồi nghiệp báo, gươm trí tuệ ngài chặt đứt vô minh, tận diệt muôn vàn khổ đau cùng ách nạn, trường từ Như Lai tối thắng toàn giác, ngài an trụ nơi thập địa pháp vân, báu thân ngài trang nghiêm thanh tịnh, 112 tướng hảo Như Lai. Cúi xin ngài tận diệt ám chướng vô minh, Om Arapasanadi, con khẩn cầu dưới gót sen bậc đại trí, bàn pháp lực diệt phiền não vô minh. Pháp vi diệu cùng muôn vàn luận giải, như diệu hương ngọt ngào từ sen trắng, đàn xanh nơi trí thù thắng đại dương, hàng thiện căn như ong mật thọ nương, hồng danh ngài khắp mười phương quảng bá, đấng thiện xảo uy dũng bảo tồn pháp bảo vô giá. Nam mô Lốp Giang Tenzin Quang Đắc, xin cung kính trì niệm.
Chanju Senjo Rinpoche Ma Ye Ba Na Ye Jo Je Ye Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Yang Hong Ne Pe Wa Jo Dong Nian Da Wa Rinpoche Ma Ye Ba Na Ye Jo Je Ye Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Yang Hong Ne Pe Wa Jo Sa Ji Be Ji Ju Ji Me Do Zhang Ri Ra Ling Ji Nin De Yin Ba Sang Ye Jin Do Me De Wei Wa Ye Zhu Gui Nang Xue Ba Jo Kang Ri Ra Wei Guo Wei Xin Gang De Pen Dang De Wa Ma Lu Zhong Wei 今日是王天津扬州也下边谁的天君节一当古主让那满的老啊你要当 Happy holidays and happy new year. See you new year. Yeah.